The modern world operates on a universally accepted assumption. The people currently living in the state of Israel are the direct, unbroken descendants of the biblical Hebrews. When the state was politically established in 1948, the global community largely viewed it as the ultimate fulfillment of ancient covenant promises. But the scriptures themselves complicate this narrative. A specific text in Revelation anticipates an identity dispute at the end of the age, warning of those who say they are Jews and are not. To understand what that statutory warning actually means, we have to step away from modern political consensus and open a formal forensic audit of the ancient record. We must treat the ancient covenant as a formal, literal contract, a legal document that must be strictly audited against the physical reality of the present day. The first checkpoint in this audit comes directly from the claimant's own historical literature. We start with the 1980 Jewish Almanac. The text contains an explicit internal admission. It states clearly on the record that, strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call a contemporary Jew an Israelite or a Hebrew. We find further historical context in the 10th century Hasdai Correspondence, which records the official genealogy of King Joseph and the Khazar royal house. This historical document traces their lineage directly through Japheth. That presents a serious conflict with the biblical blueprint, which strictly requires Shemitic ancestry to inherit the covenant. This specific demographic shift, from Shemitic origins to European lineage, was analyzed extensively in Arthur Koestler's historical work, The 13th Tribe. These historical admissions point to a severe break in the demographic chain of custody. To verify the claim, the investigation has to look past written texts and examine biological law. First, we have to look at how governing religious authority handles identity. Specifically, we examine how the Babylonian Talmud dictates the practical application of the written Torah. We have to measure that legal framework against the Messiah's statutory warning in Matthew 15, which cautions against allowing human traditions to supersede divine commandments. When we audit the biological record, peer-reviewed population genetics identify a significant presence of Eurasian lineages, rather than the ancient Shemitic ancestry required by the covenant. That biological data must be weighed against the statutory framework of Israel's genetic information law, passed in the year 2000. This legislation strictly regulates parentage and commercial DNA testing. By placing legal restrictions on these tests, the state has created a bottleneck that limits the independent verification of ancestral claims. These combined facts reveal a documented tension between the findings of modern genetics and the constraints of the national statutory framework, complicating any biological claim to the covenant seed. The audit then moves to the physical land itself. We have to compare the ecological profile of the modern Levant against the original territorial borders established under the Oath of Noah. When we cross-reference those ancient texts, they raise the cartographic question of whether the current occupants are actually living in a displaced inheritance. But the ultimate test of biblical identity lies in the generational covenant curses detailed in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26. These texts establish highly specific requirements for the true descendants. They would face global scattering, identity erasure, and transportation in cargo slave ships. This is where the demographic profile presents a fatal anomaly. The historical experience of the current occupants of the Levant does not match the strict prophetic criteria of global exile and identity erasure via the slave trade. When you compile the statutory, biological, historical, and geographic exhibits, you find a stark disconnect between the ancient blueprint and modern political reality. Scripture in Jeremiah describes a divine retrieval of a scattered remnant from the land of the north and all countries where they were driven, a gathering so profound it eclipses the original Exodus. Since the 1948 establishment was a political act rather than this supernatural global gathering, the scriptural requirement for the true second Exodus remains unfulfilled. The investigation is open. You have the exhibits. The task now is to determine whether the modern claimants truly match the ancient requirements, or if the identity of the true covenant seed is yet to be revealed.